to talk about it afterwards. So I think perhaps we ought to rearrange this room slightly for your comfort. 90 minutes is a long time to sit with your neck cricked. Louis and I had worked together before, and I think he had found that the way that I wrote was sympathetic to the way he particularly writes music. You can see it's very staccato. There's a way in which the spoken song relationship, I think, works well with this particular sort of brittle text. It's full of exclamation marks that you don't see them. It's full of invective. It's also got all those quotations that you expect from a Western situation, of course. And it's, I suppose there's a certain banality and deliberate vulgarity in all of the textual information. But the actual history would have been that after he had agreed to collaborate with me, actually, on this production, I gave him this, I suppose it was about 200-page novel, which had all the material in it, a lot of material which you never see here. I very much wanted him to use the lyrics that I deliberately written, but he was also free occasionally to take other items and lines and phrases and sentences, and indeed little rhyming couplets that also existed in the descriptive prose around the lyrics, which he did. So I gave him an enormous amount of free hand for that. When he decided on the lyrics he wanted, we again had a collaboration, and he went away for 18 months, requisite period for a composer to write music of this length, and then came back with a piano score, which we discussed. There were one or two changes and alterations. It was also a bit long still, so we had to make some cuts. Then he went away to do the orchestral score, and when he was doing the orchestral score, without actually waiting for it, we started rehearsals.
Beautiful. One other question. I was trying to count at certain intervals the amount of layered video. Was it 4 to 6?
No, about 14 layers.
14 layers.
But I mean, that's maybe nowadays not so very much exceptional. Certainly I've been into that vocabulary before with other TV productions. But maybe with this sort of material, perhaps it is a little unusual.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At the end, you have a rapper saying some definitions. Who was the rapper, and what were you thinking by putting that as a name?
Well, you have all this high drama, you know, all this intense blood, sweat, tears, buggery, whatever else is all going on stage. Then you finish the whole thing on a tremendous climactic high, and then poof, the audience has got to go home. So we extracted all the major words from the text and turned them into a rap possibility. There was an American artist who spent a lot of time in Paris and in Amsterdam. Her name was Alison Armstrong, and she put the rap together. It was entirely up to her. We just gave her the text. Unfortunately, you only get the letter B. Of course, I wrote the whole text all the way to letter Z. What was particularly nice is the audience continued to walk out and walk out and walk. She went all the way through the alphabet. It must have taken about nearly 35 minutes. The idea was, initially the Opera House was very sympathetic. There were going to be televisions all down in the underground where people parked their cars and collected their cloaks. So as they left the auditorium, they could still see her. And then even more, we had an exciting relationship with a Dutch television company that when they finally got home half an hour later,
Opera is an extraordinary place to come together the ideas of a painter and creator of theater of death, that is Cantor, and the other crazy idea of an Argentine writer that the Far West and the period of Gautesca were pretty much the same. I think also it's a very crazy and brilliant idea, making Western look like the Night Watch of Rembrandt. I would say that the differential value added to the ideas of Borges and Cantor is sex and incredible sexual fantasies. Then you embed into narratives, namely Cantor's theater of death. Sex is completely absent, and I could barely remember, except for one story, sex being present in Borges. It's a complicated injection. How did you manage?
Well, it's interesting what you said, and also what your implication is. If you think of the history of 19th century opera, Lulu, Carmen, come on, name me some more of all these females who get literally, metaphorically abused, victimized, beaten up. Not exactly necessarily in this graphic way, but it is very much part of that tradition. So here we've created an archetypal female, operatic, central character who in some senses acknowledges her own sexuality, because it's obviously very much to do with sadomasochism here, the notion is that, you know, she's enjoying the situation. She doesn't want to be subpoenaed by the horse. And the whole drama relies upon the sexual duality. So the audience reactions, remember it's Holland. Holland is naturally tolerant of all nations in Europe. But we had a lot of trouble. But the curious thing is we had a lot more trouble with the horse. We had a real horse that walked backwards and forwards on stage. That's okay. Nice, solid, fat, sexy horse. But when we put the horse in the cradle and brought her down, mayhem broke loose. But it was not a real horse in the cradle. It was a substitute, brilliantly made model. It was so well manufactured, and we lit it in such a fashion to help the illusion, that a lot of the audience were totally, absolutely convinced that it was a real horse. So in Holland, more trouble with the horse than we had with the woman.
Regarding the performance, I've heard it said that when you do sing opera, you're really naked. It's quite interesting to see the performers really naked up there. Were there any problems prior to the performance with regard to getting everyone into the spirit,
No,
I guess?
They knew this was going to be an opera directed by Greenaway. There were certain expectations. Nudity on the Amsterdam opera stage is not that uncommon. Anyway, there was a performance, I think, 4 years before we were there about Salome, and there was a huge amount of nudity in that. The two singers, I hope you agree with me, extraordinarily courageous, especially the female.
Yes.
Australian singer called Mary Townsend. A strong characterization again, and what I'd also like to believe is also part very much of the seriousness with which we attacked it. This is not necessarily a glamorous woman. So the notions of putting what could be described in inverted commas, a real woman on the stage under those conditions, again, I think added to the notion of its veritability.
Also, did the images of, when I saw the cast assembled on stage for the first time, in the distance or in the main frame, I was thinking of one of Bruegel's paintings with the activity and things. I know your work involves many artists.
There's Bergman in there as well as there's Bruegel, and I think
Okay.
there's a whole history of reference and cross-reference to do. I mean, we've set the thing in an abattoir, you know, prime place for obviously the discussion of blood, meat, and money.
One last question. Will it be available on DVD, or how can we...
We had a lot of interesting and rather sad problems. We made the film deliberately to be operable on television networks around the world, so all the rights were cleared. But unfortunately, it was never cleared properly for theatrical rights in the cinema. It has been seen all over the world on television channels. I doubt whether it's been seen in Switzerland. But it's been almost impossible to get it any clearance. We showed it 5 or 6 times at the Venice Film Festival last year. And I think the possibility of now clearing it on the grounds that it has already its reputation, and the orchestra and everybody associated can hear the ring of cash registers, and the musicians' union is so strong, it's been very, very difficult now after so long, because this has been made now for the opera. Last opera performance was about 2 years ago, and the film was finished about 8 months ago. So it's been very, very difficult to show it on a big screen. But I have to apologize, you're seeing it here on VHS, all the reds go to hell, it's very, very dark. I assure you it's absolutely brilliantly photographed, and very, very brilliant. And if you see it on a huge screen, of course it's an even a much more exciting experience. Quadraphonic sound all around the room as well, which will engulf you.
Well, thank you. It's a beautiful work, stunning.
We followed up the collaboration with Writing to Lumière, which appeared quite recently at Lincoln Center in New York, and the same television company is going to invite us to make a film of that. But we'll have to wait for the revival again, because we couldn't possibly afford to put the whole thing on just for the camera. It has to be there for a series of performances. Then they'll probably put on 2 performances after without an audience, and then we can film it. And again, I want to try and use this language, but it's about Vermeer. It has a different pose, it has a different perspective, and I suppose the actual treatment needs very much to be treated in a different way. But I think we have here a very interesting language, which of course can be applied to all sorts of subjects.